know it's, I have point of views. Sorry, Lee? Yeah, no, the other people actually went on a safari. So we are missing the lines and, you know.
That's correct. Yes.
Morning. So we can start with that.
Well, so welcome everyone. Happy to have you here to the blockchain technology session on opportunities for Africa. We know it's the last day of the event, so some are with low energy and it's early in the morning, but we hope more will join as we begin. So I'll introduce myself quickly. My name is Walid Al-Saqaf. I'm co-founder of the ISOC Blockchain Special Interest Group. I'm here in my capacity as someone who's advocating for understanding, researching, and dealing with blockchain technology as it becomes like one of the main topics, as you can tell from various trends. And today, our discussion will revolve around opportunities for Africa in the sense that are there opportunities? If there are, how do we pursue them? And then how do we face the challenges that the various circumstances may pose? And so I'll begin first by giving a briefing of what we're dealing with here. Then we have a distinguished panel that I'll introduce to you as we move to the next session, and they will each have a presentation. So I'll start quickly with the overview of today's subject. So how many of you are familiar with blockchain technology in general? Very good. So it looks like I won't need to go through all these definitions, but maybe more, even if there's one or two that don't know, then I'll just go briefly through this. So there are various definitions. So one of the more popular ones is basically the one by Don and Alex Tapscott, who authored a book called The Blockchain Revolution. So the blockchain is an incorruptible digital ledger of economic transactions that can be programmed to record not just financial transactions, but virtually anything of value. There is also another definition by IBM, and it says that blockchain is a distributed ledger that stores a permanent and tamper-proof record of transaction data. Distributed ledgers are managed through a peer-to-peer architecture with no central database, marketplace, or exchange. So you can tell the main keywords here are ledger, distributed, immutable. So you put them together, you get what you can call a blockchain. So one of the ideas or keywords that emerge is that it's disruptive, that it's decentralized, it's a ledger. Of course, you need wallets. There's something called digital cash, virtual currencies, ways of trying to prevent double spending was one of the internal problems of any payment system. There's also what is called the Byzantine general's problem. That's a bit of a technical term. Later we can go through that. There's the idea of how to reach consensus. There are common characteristics across blockchains that are different. There are some that use proof of work in terms of mining and proof of stake. And there are also things that emerge, such as halving and deflation. But this is one of the very popular graphs that you'd see. It was presented when the Ethereum launched, and it describes how a distributed network would look like. So on the left, you see a centralized network, something like you use in the telephone directories, the telecommunication, legacy telecommunication services. The decentralized structure is what the internet is about. So this is basically saying that if there's a connection from node A to node B, then there might be a way for you to reach that node through a different route. But it doesn't necessarily mean that every single node is connected to the other node directly. But there are always routes that you can reach various nodes to each other, connect them to each other. And then there's the distributed network, where you find that the network has, every single node has all the connections necessary to its neighbors. And so there are certain elements within any blockchain. As we know them, it started with Bitcoin. We now have Ethereum, Dash, various other digital currencies. I think the count has been over 800 already, and counting. And they also all strive to improve the consensus mechanism, prevent double spending. There are so various common characteristics, as we mentioned earlier. But this is the original design, and I'm borrowing this from the Blockchain Roadshow about what consensus is when it comes to proof of work, is that you have a mining process. Every single transaction needs to be verified. So you have a block. A block is constitutes a number of verified transactions. Say if you send a particular transaction of money from point A to point B. At the beginning, it's not verified. So you need to ensure that this transaction is verified, and this is where miners come into the picture, and they solve a particular puzzle. Say, so in Bitcoin, it's mainly a hashing puzzle. So they find the text that is, when it converts to a hash, it yields the correct result. But the problem here is that this requires a lot of computing power and a lot of guesses. And so the more miners you have, the more power you have, the more difficult the puzzles will be. That's why you find that mining companies nowadays have huge infrastructures to be able to generate enough to support them. And I won't go to the technicalities here. This is just a diagram you can look into. And so the idea here is that, why is this a big deal? We said that many articulated why blockchain is important, and I think that you'll have the guest speakers will also describe more on why this is important. But then the transparency element of Bitcoin, for example, as one of the virtual currencies or blockchains, is able to allow you to know who sent, which wallet sent which transaction with how much money at what time. So this is possible to trace on a blockchain. So it enables transparency, and which could be a way to form some sort of accountability mechanism. The immutability makes it secure in a way that you don't have a method of defrauding the system, defrauding the network. The decentralization makes it possible to have preserve the security, or let's say the system, so that it doesn't get controlled by one single entity. There's this, of course, 51% attack that is unlikely in the cases of Bitcoin, but the aim is that we need to minimize the potential of one single or a dominant block to control the network or to control the blockchain. There are smart contract capabilities. This is somewhat of a new domain that I hope other speakers would go into. Then there's also the security and cryptography aspects of it. That's also what sets it apart. If you look forward, I mean, you're trying to look into the interests of blockchains nowadays, you find that smart contracts is at the more or less center of it, because if you visualize a world where intermediaries are no longer required, individuals who control the gate. So, for example, Ethereum has a language called Ethereum Solidity, which allows you to program smart contracts. Have you heard of the DAO? the DAO was one particular project where people actually invested, or let's say it was a crowdfunding project. I believe it's the biggest or most successful crowdfunding project online in the history of the internet, because it generated well over $180 million. There was of course a scandal after that, because the smart contract that absorbed that money had a flaw, had a bug in it, which was exploited, and that led to some problems in the project. But the idea is that the smart contract allows anyone, if you program a particular, if you write a smart contract, it will manage the funds for you automatically. So you can have a number of conditions set so that any money coming from any wallet, for example, would have a set, can be transferred in any certain way. It can be stored, it can be sent back. There can be various other conditions that you apply without having a human element involved. So it reduces the human error, so to speak. While the argument is that the persons behind the smart contracts themselves are also humans, so it means that smart contracts need to be extremely well audited before they are released on the blockchain. Otherwise, it could cause problems. These are some of the softwares and networks that are used to experiment and test these smart contracts. There are also permissionless and permission centralized and decentralized ledgers, in a way that there are projects now by banks, for example, that would like to utilize blockchain technology, but they are confined to a set number of players. They don't allow anyone else to get into the blockchain. So there are a number of stages that you need to fulfill, or conditions. But there are also permissionless networks such as Ethereum and Bitcoin. And there are new projects such as the Hyperledger that's widely supported nowadays. I think that IBM is among the supporters of the Hyperledger, is it? And Ethereum Alliance. Ethereum Alliance has a number of other partners that have been forming together some sort of consortium to advance the perhaps the standards, bringing in new standards and adopting them. They are open and closed blockchains. They all have the means of how to reach a consensus, how to be efficient, how to minimize the time of transactions, have various applications. Some have more confidentiality than others. They are all dealing with the scaling and outreach. There are use cases that are various, from sending and receiving remittances, and this is very, very common. And then there are also what is called digital assets, colored coins, time stamping, allowing people to transact value through a number of protocols. There are multi-sig transactions, meaning that you can have multiple people approving a particular transaction before it goes through. And then there are escrow accounts that are programmed. There are micro-payment channels, side channels, and lightning networks. These are new ideas to begin to, say, make Bitcoin, for example, much more robust and faster in transaction time. Crowdfunding and tracking payments, this is still going on. Many various projects are crowdfunding through smart contracts. There are ways in which you can use smart contracts for e-voting, IP protection, identity verification, real estate ownership, you name it. If you Google blockchain use cases, you find many of these examples. And I've done preliminary research in Africa, and I found these companies. It looks like Bitpesa, for example, and PayFast, Bitcoin Fundy, Bank Mini, Sun Exchange. Many of them deal with money. So it's more transaction, the way that you deal with money, and including the Tunisian project eDinar, which gained some prominence recently to help replace the traditional dinar using blockchain technology. So these are examples. Then there are those that go beyond money, such as Chimera, IoT related. There are media security management, distribution of custos. There's Bitland, land title protection by Ghana, one of the projects here. So these are some of the areas that you can consider when using blockchain technology. And then the questions come about standardization and interoperability. It's a very big discussion that I can't go into here. And there are some requirements and challenges that will be addressed by the upcoming speakers. And there are recommendations for the future. These three speeches will be given by our colleagues here at the panel. So that's from me. Now I'll move you on to two speakers who have sent videos. So if you bear with me, I'll connect you to the first speaker, who is Pindar Wong. He is the founder, let's say, interim chair of the special interest group that we have, ISOC Blockchain Special Interest Group, and he sent this message while he couldn't make it in person. So I'll play it right for you here.
Hi everyone, I'm Pindar Wong, interim chair of the Internet Society Blockchain Special Interest Group. I'm so sorry for not being able to join you in Kenya. Hi everyone, I'm Pindar Wong, interim chair of the Internet Society Blockchain Special Interest Group. I'm so sorry for not being able to join you in Kenya today, but you're in very good hands with Nikweno and Walid. What I'd like to do is take this few minutes to explain why, in my opinion, the blockchain technology is going to be so important for the development of the Internet in Africa. I should say continued development of the Internet in Africa. As you know, the Internet wasn't supposed to be a technology that won, but because we had open code available for download and experimentation, we changed the world. Now it's time to change the world again with a different open source technology based on blockchain technology. The simplification of blockchain technology, why it's so important for the continued development of the Internet in Africa, is because of the efficiency that it produces and how this edge innovation will continue the trend of permissionless innovation, which is what we talk about in the Internet Society, to permissionless monetization. After all, if the Internet cannot provide a platform for commerce and business, then we will not be able to capture the full use. So the real benefit, as some of you know, is that the simplification of the technology is to use cryptography, which is based on locks and keys. Now, even though on the Internet no one knows whether or not you're a dog or not, in this case, if you have the key to the lock, you have possession. So this very simplification of using cryptography or applied cryptography, the key in the lock metaphor, is where we're going to get many of the efficiencies. Now, many of you know that previously we navigated the Internet via the domain name system, IP addresses and domain names. But could you imagine a future Internet that continues to evolve where everything is navigated by cryptographic keys? If you can do so, if you can imagine, that we will have the foundation for what is the blockchain technologies. Now, many of you have probably never seen a blockchain, well, neither have I, but what I do have tried to construct is a blockchain. Right? This is the use of cryptographic techniques and applied crypto to create these data structures, which can be the foundational trust infrastructure, the trust layer that in some sense we've been missing. Now, the reason why this trust layer, this Internet of Trust, or the trustless Internet, is so important for the Internet development in Africa is because you have the opportunity to lead. And that is why Nikweno, Walid, and myself at the ISOC Blockchain Special Interest Group are paying special attention to how the blockchain technology development in Africa proceeds. This is why this year, at this year's AIS event, is so important that the training occurred to have a discussion actually of how these blockchain technologies can not only be applied, but be applied by the very same people who have been deploying the Internet on your continent. The leaders there are not only very familiar with networking technology and cryptography, but now if they become familiar with blockchain technology, they can lead the world. And the reason why you can do that is because most of the world is concerned with what I would call financial technology. You have money, you buy technology. But in this case, with blockchain technology such as Bitcoin and Ethereum, you have the technology, you may or may not need money. Now, as you know, in the last 20 years, the cost of innovation has rapidly decreased. In fact, it's almost free. But what hasn't happened has been the access to the traditional financial system. So where we're moving right now is from an era of permissionless monetization, which is what we've been talking about with the Internet, to continue that trend with permissionless monetization. That's right. The ability to make money on the internet and to be able to trade. Now, previously we talked about why data equals money, and nothing better exemplifies that than Bitcoin, where in some sense, in the space of only 8 or 9 years, it's gone from a edge technology, which only sort of the hacker money, to now being more valuable than gold. Now here, it's only 8 or 9 years into this, and in fact, there are very few people who understand the technology in depth, such as the Internet Society. So that's why the Blockchain Special Interest Group is important. I would encourage you to join and get involved in our activities, because we have world-leading thinkers and people with traditional experience, not only from the deployment of the Internet for the last 20 years, people like Internet pioneers Lee Cranon, but also New Age and leading thinkers like me, who also serves on the chair of the Internet Society. So together we can move this technology, we can press it into service, and I think the best place to do that, starting here today in Kenya. The reason also is because in traditional financial systems, there is so much resistance to change. And that's very similar, at least in my experience, when I dropped out of university to help pioneer the internet in Hong Kong. Now, but in this case, instead of having telecom regulations that in some sense we're fighting against, we now have, in some sense, the whole financial system. But I would argue, though, that if you have a financial system, or a trust system in this case, that is too big to fail, you have the wrong architecture. Now, the internet is a decentralized architecture by definition, and I think decentralized architectures are more evolving. So this big change of blockchain technology is changing our trust infrastructure from traditionally very siloed and analog to digitally decentralized and horizontal. That big change will not be easy to make, but I believe because of the excellence in technical development in Africa, specifically here today in Kenya, there's a great opportunity to not just follow, but actually to lead, specifically in the area of wallet technology, because the wallets are going to be the new browsers of the internet that is evolving, this internet of value. So even though I couldn't join you today here in Kenya, you have my greetings from Hong Kong. What I would like to do is welcome you to join the ISOT Blockchain Special Interest Group. Ni and Walid will be able to answer your questions. And I thank you very much. Have a great conference.
So, it gives me great pleasure now to introduce one of the pioneers of in Africa of the internet, Professor Nkwanyo, and he is one of the co-founders of the SIG, and he is obviously well known here in this company. So, without introduction, without further ado, please.
Thank you. Let's say I'll try and define how we can benefit by addressing three subjects. First, the need for this technology and how we go about making good use of it, and perhaps what challenges I foresee in the way of adopting the technology. In the case of the need, we have challenges of financial inclusion. And so any technology that expands or improves that is of interest. By financial inclusion, you do recall that there are many people who do not have bank accounts or any access to financial support systems whatsoever. And so we have to address that issue in Africa. And we notice that the banking system itself is trying to evolve the traditional banking system, and that central banks are even beginning to license, let's say, mobile money companies and so on. So they themselves are trying to shift. Now we're looking for faster, safer, easier way of including these, let's say, on bank code. Besides, there are the challenges of, in the case of those using web, there are payment gateway challenges to enhance the e-commerce and let's say online kind of payment solutions. We do have, as was pointed out, challenges of data integrity. In other words, you do have to make an effort to ensure that overall integrity of all solutions are enhanced. And this may apply to the open data type of things that we do, but it's all about enhancing that as well as the transparency that we provide. Besides, this presents a new data structure, if you look at it that way. where the information you put there is indelible, is immutable, and perhaps it might change the way we think of solutions. So one would not want to say it is used for one kind of solution and not the other, or vice versa. If you consider it as another form of data structure, then it is becoming a mechanism by which you can create solutions depending on what it is that one wants to solve. And that itself can create new jobs. It can also create new startups, depending on what problem they try to solve and how well they take advantage of this indelible or immutable structure that now, how do we use it? How are we addressing this particular challenge? In the case of Africa, we recognize that we have to build capacity because this is of technical nature. And the technical part of it also can be used because it has to do with photography, and not everyone has good exposure to photography. So within the African context, we have to address the capacity, technical capacity of our developers. Now, we had a workshop or workshops in mobile development during this week, this week at AFNOG. We also were fortunate to have held 2 tutorials on blockchain. And the 2 of them were indeed ISO BSAFE initiatives plus BSAFE at MIT initiative. I say with strong support from Kenya One, we have 2 persons come here to join us in establishing tutorials, one based on Bitcoin, blockchain style, and the other on Ethereum. Now, we like to encourage proof of concept among our developers. It doesn't matter what problem you're trying to solve, but we want you to implement something. And there are several use cases, but I'll not list any of them specifically, but I'll share with you the area in which they are being applied. Now, there are folks looking at Bitcoin to mobile money, vice versa. Okay, and so there are a variety of solutions in that area. I'm listing the currency ones first, now look at the blockchain ones. Now, there are also those who are developing platforms in which you can exchange money. Okay, so these are tend to be some form of cryptocurrency exchanges. You can bring any kind of money in there and then try to acquire or convert to another currency. So it's fairly common to see dollar to Bitcoin and vice versa. There's also the kind that support payments. So e-commerce supports payments. There are several variety of them, different manufacturers. There's also the kind that people are actually trying to create coins by solving the puzzle money. So these are illustrations of the currency-based solutions. Now, with respect to the blockchain, our land title was mentioned, but any form of registry, and this is where the displacement may come. Any form of registry where you want to associate something with another thing. So a person has land, you want to make sure there is associated with that person. You need to then have a registry, so it can affect your environment. The African registry or a frequency registry, anything that requires licensing, and you want to be sure who is it that has that, that authority will be affected. There's also the kind that deals with certificates. And I'll use the literal certificate, university certificate as an example. People sometimes forge them and then transmit them. How do you verify, how do you enforce, and so on. So those are all a whole host of them. And it could even be your own personal documents that you want to preserve, etc., like certificates. There is also the kind that's tracking inventory. Okay, so if you have, and the inventory can be inputs or it could be outputs. So if you want to track, let's say, inputs to agricultural environment, fertilizers, what have you, and you want to be sure it's going to the right place, then the transactions become inventory operations. You are reducing some particular quantity of something by allocating to somebody else and making it valid. Okay? So it's been used to do all sorts of things. You can use it to track dams, agricultural products, and so on. You can use it to track distribution of goods, depending on what it is. What are the challenges that we are facing? Just to Now, it depends on the internet, of course, right? Because if I'm paying the Bitcoin, transferring money from one address to the other, I don't send it to that even receiving address. I announce it. And so anybody will see it. So if you don't have good internet, then we can be faced with some challenges. Also, we are trying to add value to the internet in a very, let's say, uniform and structured way across. And so things like how many people are involved in this becomes important. There is a site that I recommend that you take a look at. I think it's called bitnodes.co. Bitnodes.co. It gives you one example of where is Africa. Now, Bitnodes, large machines, meaning those which are not a simple payment voucher type, they're not a mobile type. They have a full block on the machine as an example. And so you can see how many of them are distributed across the continent and the world. If you go to such a map, you will discover that it looks very much like what the internet was in 1991. bitnodes.co, I think. Okay? But you can, if you Google Bitnodes, you will see. The reason I'm mentioning that, if you look around the map, it looks exactly like 1991 on the internet. Where in the case of 1991, US is all covered, purple, Latin America is nearly covered, okay, Australia, parts of Asia are nearly covered. But you see that Africa is not there. And the same thing is reflected in the Bitnodes. Okay, you will see also the purple, you will see North America is well covered, Europe is sufficiently covered, parts of Asia, Latin America. But once again, Africa is not. So what I'm trying to do is... Oh, well, I'm making a point, right? Because even if you look at the case of internet also, you will notice that Tunisia is covered. Are you seeing what I'm saying? Meaning that we were never... It's not like there was nothing happening. But relative to what is happening around the world, we did have a challenge. And my objective is to urge us to move on aggressively in resolving that. It will come principally from technical capacity. This will meet the resistance that in the nation, the regulatory environment in the previous case was fundamentally the telecommunications side, but this one will be facing the financial sector regulatory regime. With that, I say thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Nee. Now we actually have another guest speaker on video. He is well known as the father of the internet, Spencer, and he has sent a message that we'd like to show. Just a second. He was invited to come and attend and present, but he couldn't, so we'll play the session now.
Hello, my name is Vince Cerf. I'm Vice President and Chief Internet Evangelist at Google. And I'd like to take a few minutes to talk to you about blockchain and the technology behind it. I thank the Pizer for offering me an opportunity to speak a little bit on this topic. I wish I could be there in person, but unfortunately the calendar didn't cooperate, so I guess you'll have to put up with virtual bit. Blockchain is a technology which has got a fair amount of hyperbolic press, particularly one incarnation of it called Bitcoin. But I don't want to take time on Bitcoin particularly right now. I'm more interested in the specific distributed ledger functionality of blockchain. It's not magic, and there are some scaling issues associated with the blockchain concept, but it does have the interesting benefit that if a group of parties want to share the implementation of a ledger which all can see and which essentially no one can forge entries into as long as enough of the parties involved are, let's say, uncompromised. There is a risk that if more than half of the computing power of the group of blockchain participants is held in one party's hands, that there's potential for the generation of a fake entry. I think the experts in mining on one of them should surely be consulted about that potential hazard. notes and shares any insights that you derive from your meeting. Thanks again to Nikki Pointer for allowing me to take a moment of your time. Hope I see you on demand.
And so it's always good to have a skeptic in the house. So there are certain things that we need to consider when it comes to blockchain technology. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome and introduce Dr. Komi Welde-Narya. He is the, let's say, data scientist and researcher at IBM Africa, and he is involved quite heavily, I must say, in blockchain. So he is given the opportunity now to present some of the work he's done and also challenges that face us in Africa, in this region, when it comes to this area. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I have a little bit different perspective of blockchain. So I would a little bit differ from finance to, I would call the blockchain from the angle of service inclusion. So, service inclusion is, just to give you a number, I don't want to just go to detail of the project, but you could sense, just let me give you some numbers, like a couple of weeks ago, the Tanzanian president fired 9,962 civil servants because of forged degrees. And over 20% of fraud in Africa is actually caused by manipulating controls. And over 6.6 trillion estimated loss development basically in general, I would say in African or other developing countries due to financial inefficiencies and financial illicit behavior. And just to add more numbers, maybe I don't know you know, economic crime has gone by 7% in the last 2 years in Africa. And one more to add, if you register land in, let's say, Kenya, you could actually inject over $300 million annually. And I don't want to mention a country, this goes to students, goes to teachers, goes to schools. If you able to actually track such cases in one of the East African small country, you could actually save over $500 million. So I could go on and on and on. And the last point to mention, so maybe you know this, exporters and importers require over 51% more time to go export to the market in Africa than Asia. And generally speaking, over $65 billion being lost in Africa because of trade inefficiencies and cross-border. So now, tell me now, the problem is financial inclusion or service inclusion? And my colleague mentioned what we call in IBM research resource constraints. We have the coverage of internet, the coverage of manpower, the coverage of everything. So anybody thought about offline blockchain? So now, just giving you this all, so our mission in the African continent, and I used to be a professor of computer security, so I just moved completely to education, then I moved to healthcare, now I moved back to blockchain. So the way we look at blockchain is basically, blockchain really could save lives in Africa. You see a lot of counterfeiting, a lot of medical records being misused, abused, and blockchain can actually bring lifelong learning to African children. I can go deeper and deeper, and blockchain actually can bring economic empowerment for African governments through transparency and accountability. And generally speaking, blockchain actually could address almost all of the SDG the Sustainable Development Goals. If you just go and link all and map to the directives that we are working. So having said that, a couple of challenges we have seen in the adoption. Maybe I'll give you also a couple of projects which we have done in a very, very large scale. One of the projects we are doing with our partner, the Maersk Line, is the cross-border trade, which is really very transformational in a way for allowing a technology that allows the farmers actually can see where their goods are going from into it. So an example would be, we tried the technology here in Kenya from avocado shipper from here to Notre Dame. We tried the same platform, an Indian farmer shipping orange from India to Dubai, then to the warehouse, from warehouse to Spain as a juice. We tried the technology from South America to Europe. We tried the technology from Europe to United States. And overall, if you look at trade, there are two branches of trade. One part is the movement of documents, and the other part is the movement of the good itself, right? So the two actually go in different ways. So if you look at, and just to give you an example, in Kenya, if you wanted to export to even a neighboring country or just cross the ocean, if you like to export avocado, you have to touch base over 20 offices. So now what happened, you have to go to the Kenya Revenue Authority to get what you call a certificate of origin. When you're trying to get a certificate of origin, you are a dependency of what they call bill of lading. When you're trying to get a bill of lading, you have what they call the packing list. When you're trying to get a packing list, you have the phytosanitary documents. And so this is true everywhere in the world. Okay, what happened here is that there is all these departments are siloed, right? So although we're trying to address here what we call a single window system, you just push a document, but at the back, everything is again goes by boat, by food, by motorbike, by whatever. So you name it. So the overall efficiency, actually, in general, the document processing, and let alone once you have all these documents, and you need to pay for the courier. So exporters paying for, let's say, for I don't want to mention a name, but just think of one of the couriers to international couriers. To ship these documents from Kenya to Netherlands, you pay $200. Now, by the time you arrive to the port, and the port guy can deny that I haven't seen any of these documents before you are giving to the shipper. So, by the time you arrive to the port, the truck is arriving there, and the truck maybe carries the avocado, like avocado on the way will expire, it's got rotten avocado. So, now maybe you're shipping avocado, maybe inside your ivory. So you see, connect all these problems. So people are talking about blockchain, but what about the analytics? What about the cognitive technologies? You can just think of, and that's one of the largest projects which basically we have done, and we continue doing. So the other thing we did was that, maybe I don't know if you know the number, it's 1.5 billion people in Africa and part of Asia, actually they don't have an ID. So not having an ID means you're actually prevented not to access the basic services like HIV/AIDS, from the healthcare to financial inclusion, education, etc., etc. So you can actually go and look at this in the World Bank at ID for Development. That the number is publicly available. So we tried to develop the technology that allows schools to onboard students, and then trying to log every kind of learning transaction in the blog. And then you apply technologies that help the kids to carry their, what we call it, the learning wallet. So can a child can carry the learning wallet throughout the lifetime, and by the time you arrive to the job interview, you don't need to be interviewed, you just show, this is me, this is my UAID, just query the blog. So I don't want to go into detail. So there are lots of challenges, and adoption is one of the biggest problems, and scale is another problem. And there's a huge resistance we have seen it in the continent because maybe you are better than I in this aspect. I think in one hand we are trying to address the problem, and on the other hand the economy is controlled by a few people. So we are trying to introduce transparency and accountability by design, and that you are actually excluding those empowered people. And I have such a big resistance to penetrate the area for service inclusion. I have many stories to tell, but let me pause here, and I can take questions.
I mean, certainly we'll have an opportunity for discussions, but before that we have Gihan to help. Gihan Diaz, also a founding member of the SIG, to help us see the way forward. And so he'd like to present.
So thank you, Walid. And so let me first, before we're looking at the way forward, which actually to me is very cloudy, in a sense that we do not know what might happen. But let's look at the requirements and challenges, and then of course maybe we can think of ways to move forward in the discussion session. Okay, so I think Walid and several other speakers gave an introduction to blockchain, but let me try to come up with a more technical introduction to blockchain in a very short time. So this I mean we could talk about this for an entire week, but let's do it in 10 minutes. Right. And why am I talking about this? You might say, oh, I just want to build a blockchain business. Right? Why do I need all this technical stuff? The reason is, okay, blockchain is built on technology. And if you don't understand the technology, you may be trying to build something on top of sand, on top of ice, right? Something which may suddenly disappear, and you'll be left, standing in the air. So let's try to get at least a basic understanding of what is a blockchain. So we got a couple of definitions. Let me give maybe a slightly technical definition. A blockchain is a shared, distributed, immutable data store that is used to maintain a continuously growing list of records. So let me look at these three words one by one. Shared. So you could, of course, have a blockchain which you just keep to yourself. Technically that would work, but it would not be very useful. So the main purpose of blockchain technology is we have some data which is shared by many people. And there are many ways to do this. I mean, if we want to share something, what can I do? If I want to share something with you, then I can upload it to Google Drive or Google Docs and send you the URL. It's shared, right? Very, very easy. Or if I want to share something with you, I just copy it onto my USB drive and give it to you. It's shared. So what's the difference between this and blockchain? Right? What's the difference between sharing things by sticking somewhere or copying it to you, or even, in fact, I can print it out and give you copies. I'm sharing it. All things are shared. What's the difference between that and blockchain? In blockchain, all the information is shared by many people, and you could have everybody have a copy of it. So if you take Bitcoin, everybody who wants to participate in Bitcoin can get a copy of the entire Bitcoin blockchain, which is so many gigabytes, but that's fine, you can get it. And there can be different types of blockchains. One type, and Bitcoin is the best known example of that, is a public or open blockchain. It is readable and writable by anyone. So, if I want to, I can just get in to one of the Bitcoin, any node, and then download the entire Bitcoin blockchain. Or I can download part of it, whatever I like. And then I can go through it at my leisure. It is completely readable to me. Also, I can create my own block and I can write it onto Bitcoin. So anybody can add things onto Bitcoin. And here is why this, well, and that's not necessarily a feature of all blockchains, I'll get to that. Public blockchains are typically permissionless, right? Dr. Nee talked about permissionless, no, sorry, well, Matilda talked about permissionless as well. Permissionless means you don't have to go somewhere, as you were talking about, go to a government office, register yourself, get a piece of paper, and come and say, now I can use Bitcoin. There is no Bitcoin Authority of Kenya. There's nothing like that. You don't have to go there and get a permit to use Bitcoin. Right? So it can be readable and writable by anyone. But here, I want to just say, it's not as easy as that. You cannot write to Bitcoin as you like. There's a whole lot more which we will come. Then of course we can have private or closed blockchains. And actually to me personally, these are much more interesting. And I think maybe that's the type of thing you are talking about as well at IBM, where they are used by a certain group of people. These are sometimes called closed or private, which means that only if you are a member of that group will you be given access to read it. And only if you are a member, maybe not every single member of the group has access to write it. Right? But still it uses some kind of blockchain technology. And what are some of the features of any of these blockchains? No one organization is in charge. It's shared. Right? If I upload my presentation to Google, onto Google Docs, and I share it with you, I'm in charge. It's my document. I can delete it when I like. You can't delete it. It's mine. Right? In blockchain, there is nobody who says, I own this blockchain. You can't, it's mine. No, it is shared by whoever, whether it is open or closed, it is public or private, it is shared by everybody who is using it. And it is distributed, we'll talk about that in a moment. The additions don't have to go through any particular place. So if I want to add something, I can add it myself. I don't have to get you or someone else to do that for me. Okay, right, so I will speed up, sorry. It's distributed, it's stored in multiple places. So again, it's shared and distributed. So it's not like, say, Google, right, where I can share it, but still at Google. It's physically at Google and nowhere else, although it might belong to me. And often, but not always, the entire data structure is stored by everybody. It is copied by everybody. Again, it's not needed, right? You can have blockchains where each person has only a certain part, and which would make sense if you have a huge blockchain, and it's not necessary for everybody to have that. Now, it should be also immutable. So this is a slightly more difficult word. Immutable. It means each record or block in the blockchain will not change after it is entered into the blockchain. So change means the word is mutate. That's why it's called immutable. But the blockchain itself can change. You can keep on adding blocks to the blockchain. Each block will not change once it gets in there. And blocks can be added only at the end. You cannot add a block in the middle. The blockchain itself will keep on growing. Blocks cannot be deleted. Blocks cannot be changed. And this immutability is done by cryptography. Right? So we talked, especially said about cryptography, keys, all those things. That's what makes it unchangeable. Not because somebody says, no, you cannot change it. Right? Nobody sits there as a gatekeeper and says, you are a bad person, you try to change it. That's how it's done in traditional IT systems. Right? Blockchain does not have that feature. So very, very quickly I'll go through this. How is immutability achieved? The contents of each block is protected by a cryptographic hash. Now again, we could spend days talking about that, such that any change in the block will invalidate the hash. So just for now, please assume there's something called a hash, and if you change the block, the hash will change. Now, how do we prevent blocks from changing? You include the hash of the first block, somewhere down there you can see it, in the second block. And you include the hash of the second block in the third block, and the hash of the third block in the fourth block. Now, remember, if you change the block, the hash will change. But the hash is somewhere else, it's in the next block. So if you change the block, the hash and the block will not match, and you immediately know it has changed. And since it's a chain, if you change one block, all the other blocks and their hashes will have to change. And since each block is kept in multiple places, one person, if I go and change my block or the next block or the next block, it does not help because you have your own copies and you can always check. So this is a very, very basic thing, but that's how it does. Okay, so I will not talk about all this, how these hashes are computed and so on. Now let's look at a couple of different types of blockchains. First of all, we have public blockchain. We talked about them. Bitcoin is the most famous one. Ethereum is the next most famous one, but there are lots more. Somebody said 300. Some blockchains implement cryptocurrency, like Bitcoin. But one thing to remember is that not all blockchains implement cryptocurrencies. That's just one application, like we talked about earlier. So there are many things you can do which have nothing to do with cryptocurrencies, right? So implementing cryptocurrencies is just one use of a blockchain, right? Blockchains are simply a means of sharing information in a secure manner. So you can also have private blockchains. We talked about that, so I'll keep going since I'm in there. Then we can have what I call open source blockchains, which are basically software. Right? Anybody can download the software and then you can implement it. And then you can get your friends or colleagues or whoever it is to use that blockchain. But the advantage in using open source blockchains as opposed to trying to build your own blockchain software is it's open source, it's available, it's free. Right? And other people are using it. So if there's any bugs in it, it would hopefully, the famous open source paradigm, be very easily identified. So these are three things. Again, since we don't have time, I will not go into detail, but we could discuss later. Using blockchains. Here are the challenges. Blockchain technology is very complex and difficult to understand, right? Very, very few people in this world actually understand cryptography. Walid, when he started the program, he asked who here knows blockchain, and I saw people were a bit reluctant to raise their hand because everybody feels, yeah, well, I don't really know about blockchain, which is true, right? Very, very few people in this world can get up and say, I understand blockchain or I understand cryptography. It's a very difficult subject. But if you use something without understanding it, you are going to be in trouble. Bitcoin are made for specific purposes. Many people think blockchain equals Bitcoin, Bitcoin equals blockchain. Don't think so. Use Bitcoin if you want Bitcoin. If you just want a blockchain, look around and find a blockchain which suits you, right? Using Bitcoin for things which Bitcoin is not supposed to do is quite difficult and very expensive, right? And especially Bitcoin, the transaction cost is quite expensive, right? If you're trying to do something and you're trying to do it for like a couple of cents, right, for a transaction, you cannot use Bitcoin. Bitcoin is too expensive for that. So, going forward, these are my suggestions. We can discuss it. Spend some time to understand blockchain. If you want to do blockchain, please, there's plenty of tutorials, plenty of videos, YouTube, all sorts of things. Spend some time to understand. In fact, there are books. People read to tell you. Figure out if what you want to do needs a blockchain. Many people say, oh, blockchain, let's use blockchain for my whatever idea. Why? Is that the best thing to use? So figure out if you want to do something. Actually, blockchain is just one technology of cryptography enabled shared, storage. Sometimes some other technology is better. So I had a couple of my students looking at various applications, and all of them eventually said, oh, we are not going to use blockchain because we found a different technology which actually is more suitable. Don't use blockchain simply because it's a current buzzword. Right? Use blockchain if you are convinced that that's a technology you need. If not, use whatever is needed, the best for you. Make sure you or your staff understand the technology. Otherwise, you will probably get burnt. So if many of you are looking at blockchain, my final piece of advice is, please don't use this technology. Don't build applications on top of this technology. Don't invest in this technology unless you are fairly sure you understand it. Or you have some staff who understand it. Otherwise, you are quite likely to get burnt. Thank you.
Thank you. So that's good food for thought and a way to transition to discussion. So I'd like to invite the audience. We have about 30 minutes or so for discussions, questions, comments. Introduce yourself and feel free to ask the mic around.
Yeah, my name is Walu from Nairobi. Thank you for the presentation. I'm particularly interested on the private blockchain, wanting to understand exactly how it works when compared to the public blockchain. For example, in the public blockchain, you have people who mine, who do the mining, and they get compensated. In a private setup, I want to understand who will be doing the mining and then what is their motivation, how will they get compensated, how therefore does the private blockchain become sustainable? Thank
I
you.
will answer, but I would like to there's an answer. Right. Okay, so this is something I try to avoid in my presentation since that takes some time. Okay, so there are different ways of, so basically as I said, in a blockchain we have these hashes which go from block to block to block to block, right? And the question is, how can we prevent somebody from just creating a hash and somebody else from creating another hash? So Bitcoin uses this concept of proof of work, where you have to do, I won't go into details, a whole lot of computation, right? A whole lot of computation to create that hash in a particular way. Now in a private blockchain, there is no need for proof of work. You could simply say, okay, it is you and me and she and somebody else, and we all know each other, and we can use basically digital signature technology or some other technology, doesn't really matter, to create those hashes. But again, I won't go into details, but in a private blockchain where everybody knows each other, you don't really need this proof of work. There is also another concept called proof of stake, again, which I won't go into, which again says, okay, I have invested enough stuff in the blockchain so that I will, my signature is, or my, I don't know the signature, but whatever, is accepted by others. Right, again, to really talk about it will be much more time. But maybe, yeah. So the question was, how does a private blockchain work?
Oh, so okay, maybe I will tell you one of the private network, the Hyperledger, how it works. So basically, the private networks are meant for businesses in general. Businesses cannot afford waiting like 8 minutes or 9 minutes for transactions to settle, etc. So in the private network, what we do is that basically we run a smart contract. So smart contracts are a business logic that maps the agreement between the different entities in the network. So and that smart contract is installed at the different peer nodes. You execute that smart contract against the transactions coming, and then you broadcast across the different nodes. The node has to reach a consensus to commit the block within Ledger. So the there is no need to do proof of work. So everybody has the same copy of the smart contract as part of embedding the transaction. So you want that smart contract against the transaction, and then the consensus algorithm basically takes, depending on the kind of consensus algorithm we have, and also it depends on the business needs. So for example, a business X required to have like a majority vote, the other may be required for maybe one of the many can vote, or depends on different policies you implement. And again, there is no monopoly, and you have to go through all the consensus processes. But you don't need to solve any mathematical problem.
One way to look at it is that when the people adding the things to the block cannot be trusted, then you have to do proof of work.
I mean, they are trusted you do.
Other questions? Yes, please. Then we have, after that, we have gentlemen here.
My name is Jacques, I'm from Benin. My question is about how to decide it's time to use blockchain. Because based on one of the characteristics of blockchain, like the way data could not be tampered, I tend to think that I can use it for application like civil registry, because information cannot be tampered. But I would like to have some kind of clues in terms of deciding, selecting the right moment to use or the right place where I can use blockchain.
We can take another question before we
Morning, my name is Badru from Uganda. I'm looking at, for example, OpenChain. If I wanted to do a simple remittance system, right, for example, a private remittance network where people from all over the world can send money to people back home, is that something that would work in terms of it's not open, you go to the site and you send them the endpoint and somebody goes and collects it somewhere? Is that something that would work that way?
Thank you. I mean, we can answer those and then move to another set of questions. Who would like to answer?
Okay, could I have the first question again?
What is the use of, when to use
when
blockchain?
to use
When to use blockchain?
Who would like to take this?
We can take- So again, you can use it right now if you want. So do you have the right use case, the right requirements, and the appetite for the government to use? It's happening now, blockchain, right, in the real world. So let me give you an example, exactly the problem you are mentioning. So we built what we call the secure document store. The secure document store allows you, the different participants in the network, to, let's say, I generate a document that this is my file. So I want to use that as a collateral to the bank. So what is happening now, you can extend that to civil registration, etc., etc. So what happens now, no more of a person can go in and register the same car to different bank as a kind of collateral. That right now that's happening actually here. So there was a case a couple of weeks ago. A guy with a Land Rover has multiple insurance, and he intentionally does accidents, and they try to cover it. So the reason why, because you don't have a leisure that no one can actually look up at what is happening. So again, to answer your question, you can start building now if you have the right use case, the right appetite.
For me, because I'm trying to promote development, I don't want to prescribe. I think, depending on the problem you are solving, ask yourself which blockchain property can help you enhance integrity, okay, of the solution. So if it turns out that you can see that there are places where the immutable nature of the block can be of use in improving trust and value of the thing, then you do it. Because if the moment I start to constrain it, I'm actually killing designs. So I keep it open. That's one way. And the same way apply to the transmission, that question that you raised, because you can move it into some currency, cryptocurrency, move it international, and convert it if that helps you. So it's all up to what you want to solve. And so I encourage you to take a look at the problem you're trying to solve, and as which of the properties you learn, as was described about blockchain, best helps you.
Okay, so let me expand on what Dr. Nee said. So you asked when is the correct time, and well, it's when the market is correct. I mean, the technology has been mature for a while. It will mature some more. But I think more important is you had application, you had civil registry. Now figure out, okay, what technology do I need? Does your civil registry need sharing? Does it need distributedness? And does it need immutability? Right? If it does not need sharing, if it does not need distributedness, then blockchain is not what you need. So many people say we want to use blockchain, but they have a very centralized system where everybody comes in and does things, centrally controlled. Then blockchain having underneath doesn't really make much sense. Right? If everything is centralized. Like M-Pesa, right? M-Pesa is centralized. Right? There's only one company which does that. So, would it make sense to have blockchain at the bottom? I'm not sure. I mean, because blockchain at the bottom is really suitable for decentralized systems where nobody overall is in control. So your application, would it make sense for nobody to be in control? Right? Maybe it's for vehicle registration, insurance, whatever the application says. Okay, would it make sense? It might. Right? It might make sense. Do we need a, motor, whatever registration authority in the country? Maybe not. We just buy the vehicle and we just put the information about that in the blockchain. Fine, right? I think that would make a lot of sense, a lot of business sense, but then we have to do it that way. And sorry, again, I couldn't remember your question.
Money transactions. Local money transactions. Remit.
It must be my own private.
I mean, I can elaborate more on that. I think, I'm not sure if you know, but does anyone know how much the total market cap is today for virtual currencies? Can you imagine?
Billions.
Billions. But how many billions? I think it's well over 85 billion as of today. Something staggering is happening, and the reason many whom you ask is they don't trust governments anymore. They don't really trust central authorities. They think, I mean, rightly or wrongly, is that perhaps Bitcoin or similar currencies are the refuge in case of calamity, in case of crises, in case of central units going out of whack, where no one can trust anyone. And I like the notion of trustless networks, where you don't really need to know a person, let alone trust him. So as long as the data and math is correct and the cryptography works, then it should be okay. So that gives a sense to end users thinking, all right, if I have stored my wallet, say, Bitcoins in a safe place, I can come 10 years later and come back and restore it. I mean, shouldn't be a problem, unless total calamity and the whole computer network of the world is destroyed or something like an Armageddon scenario, which is not likely. But if the government collapses, my Bitcoins are safe. In fact, my Bitcoins may rise in value. So if you notice, the moment there's a financial crisis, there's some sort of spike in Bitcoin purchases. So that's just one example, but I would like to warn you, everything has risk, and there's really no utopian solution for this. But just giving you the mindset, we are all humans and always try to be risk averse. Risk aversion is there in our mindset. So some investments have now began to become more and more convinced that this is the way forward for some people. Okay, who else would like to ask great questions?
Again, regarding the fund transfer, I would like to suggest you ask yourself the same questions. What really is happening here, right? So let's assume it's a normal type of fund transfer. I go to an agent, I give them some cash, and then my friend goes to another agent somewhere else and he collects cash. Assume that's your scenario. Okay, so what do you need? You need some way for this agent to say, I have got money, and then transfer that money to the other agent, so the other agent has that money. And it doesn't have to be Bitcoins. It can be shillings, it can be dollars, who cares?
Anything of value.
Yeah, anything. And then the other agent, when he pays the money, he should be able to say, okay, I have paid the money to so-and-so, so I have discharged my obligation. Now, all of that stuff must be somewhere inside your system. And remember, if you are really going to use blockchain, I mean, you can do a system like this, no issue, right? I mean, NPS has been doing it for years. If it's want to be distributed, then there cannot be a central authority which handles all of it. Right? This agent and that agent should be working independently. Right? So that's a trick. Many people who try to use blockchains come up with something where, oh, I need to make some money out of it. So therefore there has to be some central point where I keep control of everything. But usually that's not the correct way to look at a blockchain system, a blockchain-based application, right? By design, they are distributed. So it's a bit tricky, I would say. More questions?
Good morning. My name is Irene from Kenya. I want to understand a bit more about the cryptography. So in e-commerce payments, you've got your private key that you can use for repudiation. So
Non-repudiation.
Non-repudiation. So in blockchain, how is that incorporated?
That's basically the proof of work. I think maybe you are more. No, I am not listening.
Okay, there are a number of areas in which you use it. Hashing is a cryptographic technique, meaning take a large piece of data, extract a digest. Okay, if that data changes, the digest will change, so that's cryptography. Besides, the one who is trying to spend the money must prove, okay, that he's the one who was paid. Meaning we have on-screen transaction outputs, which have a script around them, and when you are trying to spend it, the script is executed and it checks whether you indeed have the private keys for that address, whose money you are trying to spend. So there's signing, there's verification, and so on and so forth. All that is cryptography.
Let me add is that usually the weakest link is a human being. And if you lose your private key, then you lose your money. And I remember countless cases of people who threw away hundreds, if not thousands, of bitcoins at the very beginning because they lost their hard drive and their private key. They could have been millionaires, if not billionaires by now, but it doesn't make them feel happy. But it just lets you understand the value, the importance of maintaining your private key and making sure it's not stolen. Any more thoughts or questions or comments? Let me bring in the discussion a little bit closer to what is happening today. You know, there's now a crisis in the blockchain community, in Bitcoin in particular, in terms of the lag, the time it takes for transactions to go forward. I mean, there are two main camps. One is called the SegWit, and then there's the unlimited blockchain, Bitcoin Unlimited. The idea is that they'd like to find a way forward to resolving the problem of the long delays or time it takes for transaction to be confirmed. And then there's also the Lightning Network now being developed, experimented with. What do you take of these efforts, and where do you think it's going?
I'm not too familiar with all the details, but I think part of the problem has to do with the size of the blocks. And there are some who believe that it should be bigger, and there are some who say that we can improve the technology that is used to maintain the same size. And there's a debate going on, and there's no winner at this point. Because some miners are reluctant to increase the size, there are some who are wishing that the size is increased, others think that we can find some algorithmic solution, and that debate has not been resolved.
maybe to add to what he said, on top of what he said. So one thing maybe is happening with just studying yesterday, the fact that the more the ledger is going, the difficulty level, the mathematical secret to solve become more difficult and difficult. So of course there are a couple of techniques. They start pooling technique, they start archiving all the ledgers, but that is not solving, and a lot of fortune happening and at the same time. So how to, also the side of the block becoming an issue. So yeah, I don't know where they are going, but it's becoming more difficult for businesses.
By the way, there's an annual event at Africa Blockchain Summit, is it called? A conference in South Africa. It was earlier this year. And one of the interesting phenomena that happens that people who started very enthusiastically with Bitcoin years ago now are beginning to move to blockchain away from Bitcoin. As, okay, they started the idea, but now it's out of their hands, it's into the market. Now, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Ethereum's growth in the last few weeks. I think it has now surpassed or reached 50% of the market cap of Bitcoin. So there are predictions that it might surpass Bitcoin. And maybe that is temporary, someone else will come over and take over. So it's very dynamic and it's fluctuating rather. So one advice is don't stick or don't feel that this is the ultimate solution to all, the ultimate currency, cryptocurrency. There's also another thing, there are some what are called crypto assets. Asset is similar to the way that you locate, let's say, a particular material and say this costs so and so dollars. So then you trade this asset. You don't no longer use the dollars, and that's crypto assets. And there are so many crypto assets that are using Ethereum, Ether, others are using Bitcoin. So it's beginning to shape in various ways and directions. So it's not, none of us know where it's heading next. But it's important to realize this is very important for us to keep abreast with. So I'm not sure if we're almost reaching the end of our session, but I'd like to remind you that this is an interesting way to move forward. It's important to be involved in the discussion, the research, in the special interest group that we've created. We welcome ideas, we welcome thoughts. I'd like to have partnerships in the future with whoever is interested in pursuing this. We take it from an internet, ecosystem, internet viewpoint, because we believe without a proper internet, even a blockchain cannot work. So that's the prerequisite. But if there are no more questions, just one more, yes.
Yeah, so the last question I have is about investing in this technology. There are people who tell others that you can be a shareholder in the mining business if you contribute. So I wanted to know from your experiences, are these people for real, or it could be a Ponzi scheme? Well, that's a good question, but I'm not sure if we have an answer because we don't know who talked to you. But no, just generally, I'm sure they are talking to everybody. But I would be quite skeptical because mining nowadays is not an easy thing. If you look into the hash power that you're required to have in order to generate a single Bitcoin, then that's enormous. You need to have a multi-story building with massive computers to run continuously 24/7 in order to be able to compete. So I don't think the mining is where your money should be at, unless you're in China and have billions of dollars to spare. But of course, other areas which you can have startups who develop on ideas on using blockchain for the betterment of society, for example, real estate, medicine, e-health, education, identity, all sorts of areas. So that's where you should be at. That's where you should, as investors, invite you to consider supporting startups in this region.
Sorry, I'm interested in your submission. You opened a very interesting, probably potential weakness for the Bitcoins in terms of the location where the mining services happen is based on probably the existing location where financial strength exists. So it's highly unlikely that we're going to get many miners in Africa based on your submission. But you probably get them in China, or as you said, so if we turn the lights off in China for one reason or another, what's the impact?
I don't know.
Look, I have done a fair amount of mining.
Not today, no?
I still do something. The problem is the cost of power. Okay, so if you have good power solution, you can successfully mine. Okay, but if you are paying for power at 40 cents a kilowatt hour, it's not likely you'll make it because competition is lower than 10 cents per kilowatt hour. So that's one of the problems. It does not preclude anyone from Africa from engaging that. Okay, but the point he's making is also true. The amount of hash power that you need to produce a coin is significant. Okay, the current prices, it may not be worth your while to try to do it. But people don't mine alone. See, this is why they are telling you this story. Me, I joined a mining pool. Okay, and my mining pool is in China. Okay, but I'm mining in Ghana. But to cooperate, because otherwise it will take forever for you to get a fraction of the coin. But if you join the pool and you're all contributing terahash power to the pool, anyone who solves the puzzle, you all share, right? So you continue to get small amounts per day, per whatever, you see. So we do 4 mining pools, which then enables the become worthwhile.
So they are real, they're going to pay.
I don't know
I think one thing maybe, if you give me 1 minute maybe. So I think I'm sad to say this, but let me say, I think if Africa wants to go to the next level, I think we need to demystify Bitcoin. And we have so many really difficult problems we need to address in Africa. And yes, Bitcoin is one application, and we keep talking about mining. I have in the lab, maybe, I don't know, systems, ZZ plus machines, big, and I have a horsepower of maybe 1,000,000,000 machines in the office. Would I spend my money on solving that? No, I have billions of problems in Africa. I want Africa to go to the next level. So what are the real problems we have in Africa? We can apply the underlying technology of Bitcoin to the blockchain. I encourage you to invest in this kind.
I think we have run out of time, and there's a session after us that we need to prepare. I'd like to thank the panelists and thank the audience for attending, and I hope you benefited from this session. Thank you very much.